We're going to learn the Maimer of Shabbos Parshas Kedoshim, Shabbos V'Borchim Ir, Tovshin Daled Mem, from exactly 40 years ago, the Shabbos after Pesach. And as we've stated previously, that year the Parshas were one Parsha ahead. For whatever reason that we're not going to get into the complexities of the calendar right now. But this year it's only Parshas Acharei, and that year it was Parshas Kedoshim. Nevertheless, it was the first Shabbos after Pesach when we start learning Pirkei Avos, and the Maimer begins with the first Mishnah of Pirkei Avos. Let us begin. And of course, we have the 40 years, Adar Boim Shnin, 40 years when we can actually be inspired more, impressed more by the Torah, because Koyim Minish Adaita the Rabbi Halavai. It should be for us that we should be able to take it in more and apply it in machshava, diber, meiser, in thought, speech, and deed, and in all good things. Moshe Keebel Torah miSinai M'Sarah Yeshua. Moshe received the Torah from Sinai. He gave it over to Yeshua, to Joshua. If you do a dir chak mochad mur bazeh b'diber mashal Moshe Keebel d'shnas tovshin beis, and it is known that which the Rebbe's Rebbe, the previous Rebbe, the Rebbe's father-in-law, specifically learned within this Mishnah his various questions in the Maimer, which he began with these same words. Moshe Keebel, in the year of 5702, 1942, Mipnima Emerkan Moshe Keebel Torah miSinai u'lechayra havlei lemeimar HaKadosh Baruch Hu nosan hazatayra leMoshe. Why does it say that Moshe received the Torah from Sinai? It should have said that the Holy One, blessed be He, gave the Torah to Moshe at Sinai. But specifically it says that Moshe received the Torah at Sinai. Void b'dayek sham dehinei b'mishnah zu choshev inyan reif and kabbalas haTorah v'yishtalshalusa midoir l'doir. He also points out in the specifics of this Mishnah that the Mishnah enumerates the way the Torah was received and passed down from generation to generation. That's where the Mishnah says that Moshe received the Torah from Sinai. He gave it over to Joshua. Joshua gave it over to the elders, so it was passed on. The this really refers to the whole oral tradition, the way it was passed down, the oral Torah. If that's the case, then this really should have been the first Mishnah in the whole set of Mishnayos, in the whole in the Talmud, because it's saying how this works. The Talmud should have started with saying, look, Moshe got the Torah at Sinai. And then it came with the written Torah, and then it was passed down, the tradition, from generation to generation. But this is not the first Mishnah in the Talmud, it's the first Mishnah in Pirkei Avos, which is in the order of Nezikin, which is about in the middle of the Talmud. So, so why was it then set in the middle in the order of Nezikin? And at the end of Nezikin. And in general, the tractate of Avos, what's known as the Ethics of the Fathers, speaks about good conduct and good character traits and attributes and how one should conduct oneself. So the Rebbe says that his Rebbe, the previous Rebbe, explains there in that discourse, in the name of the commentaries on the Mishnah, that's exactly the reason. Specifically in this Masechta that deals with having good character traits and how to conduct oneself properly, they said as the first Mishnah that Moshe got the Torah at Sinai. To tell you that the good characteristics and character traits and the instructions that are given in this tractate, the sages of the Talmud did not just pull it out of their heart and pull it out of their hat or make it up. Like there may be character traits and for that matter common by sages and philosophers who come up with things, what should be the right way to do things and what should not be the right way to do things, and there's all types of ways of thinking. So here they say, no, this is not how the sages came up with what they figured would be sound counsel and good advice. This is what they came up with, what it says in the Torah. Ela af elu nemru b'Sinai. These are also from Sinai, like the rest of the Torah. Now we know that our sages taught us, we have this in the Medrash, that the first Redeemer is the same as the final Redeemer. So the first Redeemer is the final Redeemer, meaning Mashiach. The first Redeemer was Moshe, and the final Redeemer is Mashiach. So if that's the case, then we can connect that Moshe received the Torah from Sinai. The Moshe who Goel Rishon, Moshe was the first Redeemer. With the revelation of the reasons and reasoning of the Torah, which will come through our righteous Mashiach in the future to come. So to understand this, the Rebbe continues, we have to speak about the following. There's a verse in Isaiah that says that a new Torah will issue forth from me. The Medrash even says that the Torah, as we have it now, forgive me for a little poetic license here, is chopped liver next to the Torah when Mashiach comes. So Hevel means folly and more like nothingness. In other words, the Torah will be so great then that even though the Torah now is not only profound, but it's our life, but it will be that much more because of and we'll talk about it, because of how great it's connected to God, who's infinite and unlimited. The Hainu, the Neisel is Shiyih Torah Dachshav. So that's in addition to the fact that we will still have the Torah that we have now. The Torah Hinitzchis, the Torah is eternal, the Torah is forever. And as we know from the Rebbe Nishma Seiden, the Rebbe Rashab, that Matan Torah was only once. It will never happen again. Which means that the revelation at Sinai was so great that it doesn't have to be repeated and will never be repeated. And that revelation will never happen again in that sense. And let's remember that at Sinai, the souls literally left the bodies and they had to be revived with the dew of the resurrection, so to speak. And it says, Porcha Nishmasan, their souls flew out when they heard the first commandment from God, the second commandment from God. And it's actually, Moshe actually says that they begged him, Daber ato imanu, you speak to us for the last 8 commandments. So when Mashiach comes, it follows that the souls won't go flying out. But there will also be the new Torah. And like it says, it says that my servant will be so intelligent and brilliant, he'll be uplifted and raised and very high. And that's a reference to Mashiach. It's in Isaiah 52. The Isa Medrash Tanchuma, and the Medrash says, Yarum Me'avram. What does it mean that he's uplifted and high, higher than Abraham, V'nosav Moshe, and higher than Moses? Elsewhere in the Rambam, that I was referring to a Rambam where it says that the Mashiach will be a prophet close to Moshe. Now it doesn't say if he's close to him north or south, but he says he's close to Moshe. But here the Medrash says that he'll be higher than Moshe. Which means that the revelation of Torah through our righteous Mashiach will be higher than even Moshe Rabbeinu. That's not something which is profound or phenomenal, because we have a story in the Gemara, in Gemara Menachos, Gemara Menachos, the Rabbi M.M, Sharei HaKadosh Baruch Hu L'Moshe, v'Yeh Moshe Yeshiv Shmei Min Pi Rabbi Akiva, b'Seif Shmei Neshudas Chulu, v'Tashus Keichei Ad Shashol Rabbi Akiva, Hey Minayin Loch, v'Moshe Yalach L'Moshe Mesinim, Yishayash V'Dai Tishameisha. The story in the Gemara is that God was showing Moshe Rabbeinu all the future generations of Torah study, and Moshe, it says, was sitting and listening from the lecture of Rabbi Akiva. Rabbi Akiva was teaching Torah, who was a couple thousand years later, because Rabbi Akiva was after the at the end and then after the Second Temple, so it was under 2,000, but whatever the exact amount. And Rabbi Akiva was talking, and it says that that at the end of hearing 8 lines of his lecture, Moshe was so impressed and so profound, and here the Rebbe does just alludes to it by saying v'chulu, but it says that he was very impressed, and he felt that maybe he's inadequate because this Rabbi Akiva is teaching so profoundly. And actually, it says elsewhere when Rabbi Akiva was finally killed, it speaks about how he was able to teach a lesson from every line of every crown of every letter. I mean, this is Rabbi Akiva is considered, if not the greatest teacher, amongst the greatest teachers ever. So it says Moshe Rabbeinu was weakened. He felt belittled. He felt weak, inadequate. He felt why didn't God just pick him now? And Moshe was, of course, the humblest man on earth. So Moshe, being like that, felt that Rabbi Akiva should have. He's so great. And then why my position anyway? And then a student in the middle of the lecture asked Rabbi Akiva, "Where do you know this from?" About one of the details that he said. So Rabbi Akiva says, that's halacha l'Moshe Sinai. That's a law that was given to us from Moses at Sinai, so that's just the way it is. So then it says that Moshe Rabbeinu realized, I guess it was necessary, my piece in this picture, my piece in this puzzle. Now, there's a lot to learn from that story, which the Rebbe doesn't go into right over here. Because Moses was the most humble person, so it wasn't that he was jealous, but he felt that Rabbi Akiva should already be teaching then. But this is a step in the way. He realized that it has to be expounded, and this the Rebbe does allude to over here. So, the Rebbe himself explains this story. This is in the Likutei Sichos he's referring to. Everything that any sharp student, any erudite student, comes up with in a Navalei fashion, he comes up with something in Torah, was already given at Sinai. Just he came up with it later on. Moses was given the rules and the rules of the rules of how Torah can be learned, what is the framework, and how you're allowed to expound on the Torah. And from this, the subsequent generations of sages learned that how to deduce from one verse to another verse, like by the 13 rules that we read every morning, right before the beginning of the morning prayer. The 13 attributes of how Torah is studied, when you build on something, when you compare, when there's a general rule and a specific rule, etc., etc. So within this framework, Torah can be expounded and deduced, as the Talmud is replete with this. And there's even another place where there are 32 of these type of rules. So that's how the particulars of how this works. So similarly, the Torah of Mashiach will also be, in addition, not what Moshe Rabbeinu taught directly, But it will be with, Moshiach will be able to teach something more profound, which will be appropriate for the level, for when Mashiach comes. And that's why it says that my servant will be so great intellectually, referring to Mashiach, and there will be new details that were not yet taught to anybody. It'll be the aspect of a brand new Torah, completely new. And like the sages said in the Talmud and Menachos, Yovei toiv ze Moshe, v'yikabel toiv ze zu Torah, mi toiv ze HaKadosh Baruch Hu. So when it expounds on the good, it says, let this good come, that's a reference to Moshe. He will receive good, that's a reference to Torah. From good, that is a reference to the Holy One, blessed be He. And as it's explained in several places, in Sharmuna V'Oid and other places, the Avsham Furishkam Mitoiv Zeh HaKadosh Baruch Hu, even though when it says Toiv, goodness, it's a reference to the Holy One, blessed be He, nevertheless, there's also a reference to, it says that good also does good. So this is a reference to the revelation that'll come in the future by our righteous Mashiach. The Hina in Yovei Toiv Yikabel Mitoiv, the Moshe Rabbeinu, Shehu Pernimius Abba, Mekabel Mipnimius Atik, Hagilish Adem Mashiach Titkenu. And that's the idea of the one who's good will receive from the one who's good. Moshe Rabbeinu, which is the inner, it refers to, he was up to the level, and we spoke about this last week, the level of Pnimius Abba, which is the innermost of what's called the Father level, when God is coming to create. But it's then the deepest first part of any creation. So that's Moshe, and he's then able to get from the level of Atik, which is the crown, which is above the worlds and above the levels, and it's the part within God Himself when God is making the decision that He wants to make a world, and then there's the essence of God, and there's the essence of God when He starts the thinking process. So these are levels in Atik. But this revelation will come at Mashiach. We'll get from that level, from the source, so to speak, and not from the subsequent flow of the source, which was made for creation. We have to understand, why does it have to be that in the future we have to have a new Torah? Why do we need it? What's the necessity for this? What's wrong with the Torah as it is now? Until you may understand it better, or what have you. So the Rebbe says this can be explained according to what is explained by the Rebbe's Rebbe, the previous Rebbe, in the Maimer, which begins that he spreads forth light like a garment in 1940 in Tov Shin in 5700. That was also 1940. Like we said, 1940 was also the same kvias. The calendar was set up the same as the year of 1984, 5744. And it's, for the ways in the Hebrew calendar, it's the same as this year also, 5784, which is 2024. The difference is the Parsha is still off by 1 week. Like we said at the outset, but that's for another reason, which we're not getting into. So that year, when the Friedrich Rebbe said this Maimer, was also Parshas Kedoshim, and it was this, like the calendar was the same. And what did he say? What is the Torah? It's the intermediary between the Holy One, blessed be He, and Israel. And it is also the intermediary between what's called the light of the Ein Sof, the infinite light, meaning God in His total infiniteness, which is a description that the Alter Rebbe gives for His essence without any limitation, completely infinite. And then when he decides to create, then there has to be worlds. There's the tzimtzum, there's the constriction and contraction and concentration, etc. But that spot, there has to be an intermediary. And that's Torah. And then that's the interpretation of the verse, which is in chapter 104 of Tehillim, the Baruch Nafshi, that he spreads forth his light like a garment, and he makes he pitches the heavens like a curtain. The koi ala Torah shebechinas memutza. That's a reference to Torah, which is the intermediary, so to speak, between the infinite and the finite. And with that, we can understand why in the future there will be a revelation of the idea of the new Torah. Just like in the future to come, there will be a renewal and an elevation in the world, and like the prophet says in Isaiah 66, there will be a new heavens, so to speak, and new earth. Similarly, there will also be a renewal, an elevation and a renewal in the people of Israel. And like it's explained elsewhere by the Alter Rebbe and other places in Chassidus, that when it says that Mashiach is very high, so it says that he will be even higher than Adam, the first person who was formed by God's own hand. And Tevas Ma'oid, what does it say? It says Gava Ma'oid, very high. So it would be enough to say Gava, that he's high. It says he's very high. Yeah, very high. It means he's going to be higher even than Adam. Tevas Ma'oid, he oisis Adam. And the word Ma'oid, which means very, is the same letters as Adam, just in a different order. Adam. Which symbolizes something which is higher than any limitation and any measurement or limitation. So if that's the case, that the world will be elevated, then and through Mashiach, which is higher than even Adam and Moshe, then the world, then the Torah itself. The Torah itself also has to have an elevation, an upgrade, so to speak, and a renewal. Because it is the intermediary between the infinite and the world, so between the Holy One, blessed be, in Israel. So, but the Rebbe continues, the fact that this revelation of New Torah is through Mashiach, that Mashiach is the one who will reveal it. That means that Mashiach himself is even higher than that. But how does that work? So in other words, he's going to be higher than the Torah, and he can therefore reveal this Torah. But in addition to the fact that the Torah is the intermediary between the Holy One, blessed be He, and Israel, like it says that Israel, the Torah, and the Holy One, blessed be He, are all really one. The connection between Israel and the Holy One, blessed be He, is through the Torah. But there's something even higher than in the people of Israel, and this is explained in several places in Chassidus. Higher than even the Torah, and higher than the idea that Torah and God are fused and are one thing. And like it says, the sages teach us in several places in the Medrash, when God began the thought process of creation, He thought about Israel first. He thought about us first. I feel the Torah even before the Torah. Because if you read anything in the Torah, the first thing it says is, command the Jewish people, the people of Israel, speak to the people of Israel. That means that they were there already. And the Torah says, speak to them. So in other words, they came first, and then there's the Torah. That means it's in all levels of Torah. Even in the highest level of Torah. That the fusion of Torah and God for the purpose of creation, Israel's higher than that, because Israel's there already. So Israel's really the highest thing. About Yisrael, because the Torah is replete with references to Israel that exist already. So that proves that Israel is then the highest level. And as it's known that the Israel is called the offspring, children, sons to the Holy One, to the Omnipresent. And more than that, they're like the child prior to its being born, meaning that they're so rooted and so connected. They're totally rooted in the essence and existence of what God is. The highest level of his thought process in the brain as offspring is rooted in the intellect of their parents. And therefore, Israel is able to affect and draw forth through and with the Torah. Therefore, the new revelation of Torah, of the new Torah, which will happen in the future, is specifically through and by Mashiach, who is of Israel. He is the general soul, and the soul itself is made up of 5 levels. So the highest level of the soul is Yechida. That's the deepest level and the most quintessential point within the soul itself that we try to bring into play, at least on Yom Kippur, when it's the holiest day, and we're on the most sensitive level. And Moshiach is the most sensitive, highest, deepest part of everybody, of the whole idea of souls. So he's in the general sense. More than that, Mashiach is even higher than that level within the soul, the general Yechida. And as is known, that this level of Yechida, which is that high, and the word Yechida itself means the unique, totally unique. And even the general Yechida, it's only from the 5 levels that are identified and therefore called. The neshama is known by these 5 levels: nefesh, ruach, neshama, chay, yechida. But really, there's an essence of the soul that's even higher than that. In other words, once the soul starts getting defined, then it goes into the highest level of yechida. But the soul, the very fact that it is a soul, is higher than its 5 levels. Well, then it's a Mashiach, who etzem shelamayim b'chinas shem. So Mashiach is also then an essence, and it's something essential which is higher than any part of its identifying characteristics or definitions. The Gilu Inyan Zeh Shel Yisrael Gi Yelasid. This revelation that we have in Israel, and when I say Israel, means the people of Israel, will be in the future to come. And then it will come into the Torah. And then in that sense, then it will bring about the idea that the new Torah which will come forth from within God. God says, from within me will issue forth. Now that Rebbe points out, we mentioned this a little earlier, that this idea that the way the people of Israel will be elevated in the future, the whole idea of Mashiach is going to happen through them. And it'll happen through the people of Israel as they are souls and bodies, meaning physical people that walk around, not people whose soul jumped out, not people who are spiritual. It is a physical thing, the way we walk the face of the earth. And it's explained, in the portion of Tzav. And the subsequent discourses of the Rabbi M.M through the years, that the halachic ruling is that the primary part of the reward and revelations that'll happen when Mashiach comes, that will be specifically the way it is with human beings who are souls and bodies. And therefore, the revelation of the new Torah is going to permeate this world. This lowly world will be then permeated with something so great that at this moment we're not able to have it, we're only able to taste of it by learning Chassidus. But when Mashiach comes, it will profoundly impact the world. And it'll be this world. V'hinei, and the Rebbe continues, the Rebbe quotes this quite often at the beginning of the 37th chapter in Tanya, which says that the revelations that will happen when Mashiach comes are commensurate and dependent on our actions and our deeds throughout the time of Golus. And the way the 6,000 years that the world is the way it is before Mashiach comes. The ikar avoidehi avoides habirudim shel nitzitzes detoyu shel naflu b'shviris hakelim, and like the primary idea of when we do things are, and we explained this recently also in a previous mimer, the way it's to collecting and refining and bringing up the sparks that fell off of the level of tohu. That means within creation itself, there's the chaotic part which precedes the organizational, the organized part of creation, which is called Olam HaTikun. And at Olam HaTohu is where the world is totally chaotic, and therefore it can't last, and therefore it crashes and it explodes. And when it explodes, sparks fly. The sparks flew down into the world of Tikkun, and our performing mitzvahs and good deeds, etc., collect that. So in the previous moment, we learned that in Egypt they collected 204 of these sparks, or 202 sparks, and then there were the subsequent sparks that remained. The Rebbe said that we really already collected the sparks. He's waiting now. Now we got to get the whole thing. But whatever it is, this has to do with what our avoida is. So if there were only 288 sparks, that means that they somehow splinter too, because there was 600,000. There was close to 3 million people, 600,000 men that were between 20 and 60 when they left Egypt. So they didn't each get one full spark, right? So whatever it means. But that's how it's defined Kabbalistically in Chassidus. Now, when it speaks about, in the bigger picture, what does that mean? That means that things have to be balanced. The world of Tohu lacked balance. It was only rushing to something, but nothing settled. And therefore, the Ikra Shvira Hoysa B'Zayin Midas the Tohu, when there was the seven attributes, the way they are there, again, they were not balanced, and therefore they broke. The main thing is that we have to then improve our 7 attributes of kindness and severity, purity, etc. And this is also the time of the Omer when we focus on a different one every day. Kibush Zayin Amamin, and that's the way we conquer our own 7 little nations, because our good inclination and the evil inclination both have these 7. So we need we have to work on conquering them. Like it's explained elsewhere, and we already spoke about that, and it's explained in many places in Chassidus, that this is our primary task, to refine ourselves. Where do we get the strength for doing this? That comes from the essence of our soul. that says, look, you're here for a purpose. You're here to do something. You're here to refine the world. That means refine yourself and refine your surroundings and refine your environment. That is what your task is to do, to work on yourself, not to give into temptation, not to abstain from what you have to abstain and negate what you have to negate and to do what you have to do and perform the mitzvahs that you have to perform. That's what it's all about. Therefore, the sages tell us, in the beginning of creation, it says the Spirit of God was hovering over the face of the water. What is the Spirit of God that was hovering? That's the Spirit of Mashiach. That means that the Spirit of Mashiach was already there revealed when the world was created. That's what gives us the strength to do what we have to do, to overcome our struggles and to overcome our challenges. We already have that. That lets us rise above all this. But what does it say there? On the face of the waters. It was higher than the water. It was hidden. It was concealed. The revelation of this is through Torah. That's the whole idea that Moshe received the Torah at Sinai. The because Moshe is the first Redeemer who began the process with our exodus from Egypt, and therefore he is also imbued and embedded in the Mashiach, who is the final Redeemer. He received the Torah at Sinai. He drew it down to this world. That's what it says. He received it. Not that God gave it to him. He was able to take it and settle it and bring it and imbue and ingrain this world with it, to permeate the world with Torah. It had to be with the receiver, not the giver. The giver, of course, God gave the Torah, but the point is that he got it and brought it down and put it into this world, right? So the quarterback is big, but it's the receiver who made the touchdown. So, Mishum she'ikir ha'inyin kan hu ha'kabbalah ayidei ha'mekabel v'leh ha'nesinim l'mayla. The main thing here is how he receives it, right? The receiver. Through receiving, but not the giving, which happened from above. It is received and accepted totally in its fullest here on this earth, in the lowest realms. And that's what gives us the strength to be able to refine those loose sparks, those parts within ourselves that are rampant, that are all over and unrefined, that we're able to refine it. That's why this is the introductory Mishnah to the ethics of the fathers, which is in the order of Nezikin, which means damages, which the order of Nezikin deals with all types of damages between man and one's fellow, and monetary damages, and damages that animals do, and damages that people do, like they can do to each other, etc. The Indians say that Nezikin Indian Avedis Avirudim shall nitzayt shenofel mishviris hakelim, and in the deeper sense, this is the idea of refining it's what we have to work with the idea of the work, the toil. We have to work with ourselves, refining those sparks that fell when it was the explosion of the vessels of the world in Toyu, as we mentioned earlier. And that's why it's in Pirkei Avos, not just in the order of Nezikin, but actually in the tractate of Avos, because that is the idea of the refinement of character. To refine our character, that's why it's the first thing, because we have to know that it's according to the Torah. And Moshe Rabbeinu received this and gave us the strength to persevere and overcome and be successful. Mishum shezeu ikar avodah, because that's the primary part of avodah. To take the lulav is easy, but to be kind sometimes is tougher, especially when it's your little or your whatever, and you really have the urge to do the right thing, right? But it's really not right. That's avodah. That's work. V'zehu Moshe Keebel Torah Misinaim Sodal Yeshua Ushus Kenim. This is what the Mishnah says. Moshe received the Torah from Sinai, and he gave it over to Joshua, and Joshua to the elders. Chulu Dekoi Al Hishtalshus Mesoides HaTorah Shebal Peh. That's a reference to giving over the oral tradition, the oral Torah. Shekulan Misinaim, it was all given at Sinai. This gives us the power and the strength to refine the whole world. And especially when you keep the instruction of what's called the men of the Great Assembly, which was the Mordechai from the Purim story was part of that, and then it was 120 sages, and they said, and the Rebbe says it's also quoted in that Mishnah, and the Rebbe quotes it here, V'ha'amidu talmidim harbe, establish many students. In other words, many should emulate and learn from these ways. So that helps refine the whole world, because everybody can be a teacher and everybody can share. And then with this you come to what it says in this chapter. In the beginning it says there are three things upon which the world stands. In the end it says there are three things that make the world exist. And the final one of those is peace, which is what completes and fulfills everything in the world. And the Torah was given to make the world peaceful. And peace itself will be complete in its fullest measure. So at the beginning of the Mishnah it says it's Torah and serving God and benevolence, and then truth and judgment and peace is what keeps it existing. Peace will be complete and full when Mashiach comes. And like it's explained also, that'll be a time of ultimate peace. Like we read in the Torah, even the lion and the sheep will be at peace, right? They'll each share, I think, what do you call those bowls? A vegan, is that what's going to happen? I don't know. They'll be at peace with each other. With the coming of our righteous Mashiach, speedily in our days, actually so. So, l'chaim.